Welcome to Frontend First. I'm Sam.
I'm Ryan.
And we talk about front-end development. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can no longer see our laps. So if you ever watched us on YouTube and thought, hey, it's pretty awkward, I can see those guys' laps. No more. What do you think about Bayesian statistics, Ryan? We just had a little, I was going to say 20 minute, but I'm pretty sure it was more like 50 to 60 minute
definitely.
digression about Bayesian statistics and the language of mathematics.
Yeah. Very, very,
pretty interesting.
yeah.
If you happen to be into Taleb and the kind of stuff he talks about with statistics, he was talking a lot about the numbers around the election. I used to study economics a long time ago, and Mises talks a lot about the same kind of ideas. So that's what we're talking about. If you're interested in that stuff, hit us up on Twitter. Maybe we'll start a Discord server, and we can all get on and just waste hours of our lives talking about
Just
things
arguing about
just things that don't matter. Pretty interesting stuff, though. So what's going on this week, man? Anything new in the world happened in the last few days? No. Yeah, neither me.
No.
I was actually in my apartment at noon. And I just started hearing like frying pans banging in the streets. Just banging.
How long did it take you to figure out?
I was worried for a little bit because basically I live in the West Village, so it's kind of a dense area. And all week there's like this app on my phone, and it shows me if there's like protests going on, or if there's a fire that breaks out, or an arrest or something like that. And basically all week there was stuff going on in the hood, just basically since the election. And so I was like, oh my gosh, it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Are they really getting rowdy already? Like these, maybe fights are breaking out. It's like the middle of the day, it's 75 degrees out. Can't we just wait until the evening to get on with these things? But then I realized pretty quickly that people were cheering. They were happy. So it was actually pretty fun. And it was just being out all day on the weekend. The city was very happy.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. But pretty interesting times. Yeah. So what we got going on this week?
React. Next. Lots of React.
Yes. We paired on Friday. I have a new side project. It's related to fitness. My never-ending quest to solve my fitness and nutrition issues through technology.
Through side projects.
we're one step closer. We actually had a fun day. And it's fun because this is like an app that I'm using, my buddy's using. So we use it every day now. And we had like this deadline. We were meeting for dinner on Friday. And so it was like it was like down to the wire. We shipped that thing on Friday. No tests, no CI. Working on production data and dev. But we really wanted to finish this thing and ship it. We actually added auth to it on Friday. So that was what we did. And it was, we've been like complaining about the complaining podcast. We've been complaining about our stack for a while. And I actually finally feel like the last 6 to 9 months of like investment in React and GraphQL and Hasura and just kind of like embracing the React ways of doing things is like starting to pay off because I felt extremely productive on the side project so far.
I completely agree. I'm going to get more narrower than React. I think next, I found that even when I'm making demo projects that don't really have to do with like the whole Vercel server-side CDN model, I will often spin up a Next app just because I'm super comfortable with the config and all that. The routing, just that you get routing and it's just a file versus create React app, having to add React router and do all that, and then not even having server-side rendering just for whatever reason. Like
I've noticed exactly the same thing. It almost feels ridiculous, but it's like that's just what I do. Tailwind is going to be easier to set up because you just drop a post CSS config and it works. Like you said, you have all this other stuff already. So
for a few like demos or experimentations, I think 6 months ago I would have been using Create React app, and now I'm just spinning up Next apps. So yeah,
Fast Refresh was there first. It's now in Create React app, but it was in Next first. I totally agree, man. I haven't tried Create React app since the latest version came out. So it'd be interesting to see. Because there is a purity about that I like. Because there are times, although really not a lot. I don't think it's happened once in this side project, my fitness app, where the server-side rendering stuff makes you deal with it when you don't actually care about it. You have to write something that doesn't work when you deploy it or when you try to build it because of SSR. But I don't think it's happened with the fitness app yet, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, nice.
Also, just, I think the first handful of projects that we worked on, we were just getting familiar with the ecosystem, understanding what the differences were between the data fetching libraries, even the approach that we would do, And this one, I'm just really all in on, just trying to embrace. The tools work so much better when you just use them how they're meant to be used. And I had this experience last week where I was doing, so the app is basically like a list of entries for different goals that you achieve throughout the week. So you can say, I want to go to CrossFit 5 days this week. And so you can toggle a day and you create an entry. And then that's the CrossFit is a goal. The good eating is a goal. No alcohol is a goal. Running is a goal. So those are weekly goals that you have. A goal has many entries. And then a user has many goals. So you had 2 users in the app. And the homepage shows you like your total entry aggregate for each goal within a week. So a goal is tied to like a Monday date or a Sunday date, week beginning. And man, just like to get the data for this, I just was like, again, I remember building my recipes app where you have the index page of all the recipes. You go into it, you get the ingredients, you edit it, you come back. I did this normalized cache thing because I was like, if I've already loaded the recipe on the homepage, I just want to tap it and get the recipe. It's already in my phone. Like, why do I have to wait for it to load again? Because that's how Ember Data would work. That's how I used to building apps with Ember. And it works in a lot of cases as well. But you just quickly go to this place where you don't want to be trying to manage an identity map, basically, period. But you definitely don't if you're working with a tool that's not even made for it. So that was just like a long trek down this path of like trying to fit my old model of how to do things in this new world. Or not even old and new. It's just different ways of approaching the problem, right? Whereas this time I was like, okay, I'm working on this screen and I see the nesting of data in my UI. That's what I'm going to get from GraphQL. And it's not about saving bytes over the wire. It's more about what's the easiest, fastest way to get the data I need for this UI.
Yeah, well, so in the identity map, it's not an identity map. It's a second version of your database that
is normalized.
It's a second version of your database. It's a second version of all the data on your server, but you don't get it all at once. Right. You only get it in chunks.
Right.
It's really hard. It's really hard to maintain maintaining one database is really hard.
It's true.
Why go to 2?
It's true. How hard is it to deduplicate data sometimes in a certain data model, right?
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I think there's a really nice, like the purist in me wants to say like, yeah, but once you get that identity map, it's so sweet when you just have like one reference to this ingredient, you update it, it updates everywhere.
Exactly. It busts the cache or whatever.
Since all your counts, all your
derived,
everything's derived, it just all magically updates. Where if you're only fetching the data that a page needs, you lose that.
Right.
There's something that you said when we were working on all this, which was, I can just fetch the data I need now and I can always optimize this stuff later.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful when you see that and you adopt that because you finish features in, an hour.
Dude, it's insane how fast we were moving. I mean, you made this comment. You were like, there's something that makes me feel like back in the Rails days when I hit my stride of productivity and it's just like, you're just like finishing features and like you're working at a startup or a company where you're starting a new app and like Rails, you're so comfortable with it and you're moving so fast that you're just like nailing these features out and the tech is not getting in your way at all.
I totally felt that way. Like we're
flying.
Just building one page, moving on to the next.
Yeah.
And then, sure, all the data needs to refetch.
But the tooling takes care of that. The paradigm takes care of that for you.
And in the future, if you want those smooth, offline support, all those features that you get for maintaining that second database, you can layer it in.
Exactly.
And you don't have to go all or not. I mean, like, what is the first version of layering in? It's like a context that holds some data.
Exactly. And, even like the libraries we've used, like Urkel, have this abstracted out at that layer too. So that's like another option is like make your hook have a notion of identity and be able to keep track of the queries and refresh them when something changes or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's
the buffered query thing.
Right.
You know?
It's not fetch calls on one end and the only other end is
Apollo cache or whatever. Yeah.
There's different steps to get there. And in my two apps, I'm using Urkel. Actually, just in one app, I'm using Urkel. And I like it. I feel like I have the identity map stuff where I need it, but I can still request data when a page loads.
Yeah. The Urkel stuff does impress me, how it automatically identifies a resource uniquely and refreshes queries that use that resource. That's pretty cool, because there was a few times using SWR where I basically just have to call mutate on a query that references something that I've updated, but I just do that in a callback, and it's just, there's something about that would have made me so standoffish earlier, where I would have just, not wanted to. I would have felt like that's a missing part of the puzzle if like this page has to know to like change this. But like, first of all these are in one page component because there's like an interaction there, because the query is going to refresh when the component re-renders anyways. So if you're moving pages, you're fine. But this was on an interaction within a page, and it was just so much easier to add one line that says, oh, this query needs to be redone, which happened to be denormalized. And if I had to derive the UI from a normalized version, I would have had to write a lot more code for it. And so I would have paid in that way. And it's just interesting.
It's the mutate thing when you have to manually mutate stuff. It's interesting where it's, if you're boxed in, I'm only mutating stuff that's currently on this page. That feels fine. And that's what you're saying.
Yes.
I think you do get into a trap where it's like, okay, I just did something on this page and I need to mutate all this other data for other pages in the site.
Yeah.
That just is complexity that just spirals out of control. But you have the hard reset thing where every time you go to a new page,
exactly,
the query reruns
in the background.
Yeah.
So you might, if you can tolerate staleness in your UI, you get this really nice model where you're building these disconnected pages. And I've already like massively changed the home page from the first version to what I have now. And what I noticed was, because all the data fetching and mutation logic and routing stuff, I just have like a big 250 line component. And I love doing that now. Whereas before I definitely would start abstracting things, but I'd much rather open one page component and just do control find and be right there than like control find. Oh, user summary, go to definition. Oh, okay, this is a thing switcher. Okay, go there, open that. Especially early stages in a project, just having 250 line file that has some GraphQL mutations, which are relevant for the thing and are changing. Like I'm changing things.
That's the thing. That's the key. What is likely to change?
Exactly. And everything in that file basically was. I was changing CSS classes. I was changing the queries I was running. Oh, I actually needed this when I was creating an entry. So back in my query, I'm going to add this field to it. Before I didn't need it. And that's great. That is right there.
In the early stages of a UI project, you might start with a form. And then over time, that might just change to buttons that you click.
Mm-hmm.
And so
right,
getting all your form abstractions, like form and form input control and all that, when that stuff is likely to change, is a disaster.
Yeah.
It's just a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. So querying the data for this nested thing on the homepage and just knowing like this is just my React app has basically almost become a dumb presenting layer. And it's funny, right? Because we've been doing this fat client stuff for a while where the SPA has the smarts, but now it's almost changes with GraphQL. It almost changes how you think about some of it. Because a lot of times I was used to having my back end layer basically be a really dumb data layer that doesn't do any sort of transformation for the needs of the UI, and doing all sorts of maps, reduces, and filters in the front end to go from the normalized data set to this nested structure that was displayed on the home screen. Whereas, and you saw this and you were like, your jaw dropped when we did this last week, and I was like, check out how I got the aggregate entries for each goal within this time period. And I opened up GraphQL and just clicked those 3 buttons and it just did it. And it was like, holy crap, that was crazy. So it almost feels like, and I've heard Chris say this before on the Bike Shed podcast, where he really loves GraphQL. And he said, like, now when I'm on a project that doesn't have it, it feels like there's a missing layer of the architecture. And I feel like I'm starting to maybe get a glimpse of what he's talked about there.
Yeah, I want to, like, I think with everything you just said, before I respond to like missing layer or anything, I think like someone cynical could hear that and be like, oh, so server rendered apps where you can just write SQL? Like that would be like kind of like a response to that.
It's more like, it's not that, because we're going to add animations this week. I think it's going to be on my YouTube video.
Yeah.
And so it's completely different. Also, it just feels way faster already because of cache. The links are smart. There's so many things that are enabled by a client app that you don't get in a server rendered app without running JavaScript. Mm-hmm. So the app is super fast out of the box with Next.
Yeah.
It's more about giving SQL to the front end developer. It's about giving it to them instead of making them build it in the form of a custom API in a way that is going to just as easily hydrate their JavaScript data structures as SQL can hydrate a Ruby object on the server. So it's like you're not thinking about it. You're told, here is the query language you get, and that's how you use it to get your data. Okay, boom, done. Now it feels like, because I'm using Hasura, which is this auto-generated GraphQL API, and this beautiful, UI through the form of graphical that says, here's how you get your data. Okay, I'll do it. Done.
I think that is the response to the server rendered app, where you're saying that the reason you want to write server rendered apps is because you want access to SQL. So if there was an easier way to get SQL over to the front end developer, that's a win.
Exactly. That's
it's not about running the code on the server.
Exactly.
It's getting access to SQL.
Exactly.
So that's a really good response to like, aren't you just building a server rendered app?
Right.
If you're writing queries for every page and so on.
Right.
Yeah, nicely said.
And good restatement. Also, GraphQL did start as SQL over HTTP, literally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was before GraphQL. That was the first attempt. You would send SQL strings over an API. But man, GraphQL is just so cool, and it's like the feedback that you get while you're developing. Dude, the developer experience, they tell you if you have like an unused variable, you can't even run the code if you have an unused variable in a query that you're not using. So you're never going to like pass the wrong thing. It's just crazy. It's crazy. And then the fact that it has the aggregates and all these relationships built into it really does feel like you have a replacement for SQL, even better in a lot of senses, because there's a UI that you click around. You don't have to Google, how do I do an inner join and do all this stuff. It really does feel like a full featured query language. Really, this is GraphQL and Hasura, because GraphQL on its own is not going to do any of this for you. But Hasura has taken and I like Hasura because I feel like it's coming from devs who are like share our background, love Postgres, love relational data modeling. So the standard queries they're exposing and all the resources in your server are things like the aggregates and the counts and the relationships and all that stuff.
Yep.
So it's basically what we would create in a sense of like, oh yeah, we think in terms of resources. We want to be able to create multiple resources, and we want to do all this kind of thing, right?
Yep. By the way, I think it's fine to group Hasura and GraphQL together, even though you can say like, oh, this is app, because it's at the end of the day, it's your development experience.
Yeah.
So being able to use the existing tooling like GraphQL and do the error messaging from GraphQL.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
It's so true, man.
So having that coupled with like all the mutations and special querying that Hasura builds on top of that, it's just one development experience for us.
Totally. 100%. I'm just wondering, I'm sure there are people who have had bad GraphQL experiences for reasons that we're not dealing with because we're not writing the server.
You could probably make the same mistakes
that
designing a GraphQL API that you could make designing a REST API where you box people in. Again, it's what you said. It's about giving developers the query language. And so you could very easily not give them. You could do something in GraphQL that doesn't enable your developers by letting them query the data that they need.
Right.
Just with weird rules and endpoints and resolvers.
Yeah. Oh, you can update multiple videos. We can't update multiple people or whatever, things like that. So yeah, all that is really cool. And then, so the missing layer piece is just interesting because in like the React as a dumb UI layer thing, So I'm used to querying the data. How I would think about this if I was building this with like Ember and Rails would be, okay, I need 2 users and I need all their weekly goals, where the weekly goal is beginning on November 8th. So how do we do that in Rails? Like add a query param, I guess. There's nothing in like the spec that would say that. Also, like you're querying users, but you're having a where clause on like a nested resource. So it'd probably be like,
there's custom backend code here.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yep.
And then also include all the entries. So you'd include like weekly goals dot entries because you get the graph for the week for both users, and then you would be able to basically list them out. You would map, for each user, you would render it. You'd go through each one of their goals, and then you would do like weekly goal dot entries dot count or whatever. But you'd also be like querying a lot of the entry data or whatever, but basically you'd be traversing that graph. That's kind of how you'd be thinking about it. And then if you wanted to get the total for the week, the total amount of all entries across all goals, again, out of the box, the way you would do it would be with the same graph. There's no aggregate that points a user's week to their total amount of entries. But I needed both of these things for my homepage. And so again, normally I would think about querying the graph of data I needed and then doing maps and transform, basically transforming the data in JavaScript, because It's like, oh, I can just do that super easily. But I was just clicking around graphical and like all the aggregates are just right there, right? So I was like, I guess it just felt a little weird, like putting business logic in my like API. But the thing is, it's not. It's still in my React app because the query is right there above my component. So,
dude, it's absolutely in your React app. It would be, if you had to go write custom backend, but the back end is like code.
Aggregating. So it's almost like it's basically like a counter cache, I guess. But the reason you would add a counter cache is because you have a lot of data, let's say. So this would be like doing that just because it's easier, or not. You know what I'm saying?
There's 2 things here. There's 2 things. One is I'm not deriving everything from the original data.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like having
denormalized.
Right. That's denormalized, having the front end request a count rather than request all the records and sum them up.
Right.
There's the other side. There's another thing, which is there's now more business logic in my backend because my backend knows how to transform data on its own. But the business logic, I don't think is an issue. I don't think that's a problem. We've introduced this in a way that doesn't require you to write any backend code.
I mean, that's the reason why, right?
Right.
But
that is
feels weird that the fact that my API is responding with this very particular triple layer nested data structure, which is only 3 layers of nesting in this particular way with these sums right here because of how I'm choosing to present the data on the front end. So again, it's just back to the fact that it is denormalized from the perspective of how it's stored in the back end.
Yep.
I'm getting the entry. It's just nested objects. So I'm getting the entries attached to weekly goals, but entries are actually like not necessarily attached to a weekly goal in a sense.
It passes a smell test for me because if you needed a 4th layer, you wouldn't have to rethink your backend architecture. Your front end could just request 4th layer.
Dude, 100% it passes smell. I mean, it was so easy. I'm just saying it's like, it's just different from how we've been building apps before. And it makes your component code dumber because your backend is smarter in a sense. Your backend is more capable. Basically, these capabilities mean you have to do a lot less in your React code. So like I've just noticed that my pages are like, it feels like by the time I start writing my UI code in my React function for the page and next, I'm like 75 to 80% of the way done. And I just get to like literally call map and like add Tailwind classes. And it's like crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're writing the view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm also writing the whole app. There's no backend developer on this project. Yeah. It's just me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, but you're writing the view in the sense that like
truly the view, and there's no real model. I mean, there is, but you know what I mean?
The data you're
data
also writing, but you write it in the form of just this very simple GraphQL query that, you can generate from graphical, so it doesn't even feel like you're actually spending any time there.
Yeah, exactly. And again, because of this pattern where if you can tolerate a bit of staleness, if your data fetching library has a bit of smarts about how and when to refetch things, when it comes to making mutations, you can just do it and the app will kind of work. And it's eventually consistent. And by that, I mean like very quickly consistent. And if you need things to be a certain way, like I have a new feature I want to add where instead of just saving an entry and going back to the home page, I want to make a little interaction where you like touch and hold. And maybe it's like an optimistic UI and it just finishes and, can just do that and figure out what to happen afterwards. But I'm not worried about that at all. Like what that's going to look like. And I'm not worried about any of the paradigms or libraries I'm using going to hold me back from doing something like that. So it's just really, really interesting.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yep.
I'm having a lot of fun with it. It feels good to feel super productive.
Yeah.
With a tech stack. Yeah. And then last night I was just like fiddling on it.
Dude, the productivity is because you can work on a page
in isolation.
And request the data you need for that page and not think about any other entry points to any other pages.
Yeah.
And I know that's like the dream of every SPA.
Yeah.
But, it's actually true when you're writing this, when you're just writing a query that provides the data for the page. I know every SPA is supposed to do
that, right?
But it's not always true.
There's something about it's like the honesty of admitting up front, like these things are disconnected, and when they need to be connected, or when you need to do something that it knows about another page or another part of the cache or whatever, you can layer that in. But to start, if you can build things in a disconnected way, it makes things very, very simple. And it's still, again, super fast because you are prefetching links. You do have the cache stays there even after you navigate. So when you navigate back, it's instant, even though conceptually, from the developer's perspective, the query on the homepage is the query on the homepage, and that's all there is to it. It's not related to any other query.
You can even say like, look, even if I don't have a cache, I still get the benefits, and then I can layer in.
But the cache is an example of the kind of thing you can layer in, even if you are working under the constraint of this world where these are separate things.
Yep.
Which is what the client rendering enables.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's still an example of a cool thing you can do. It's just interesting because it's just very different from how I'd normally think about building one of these things with the tools I've used in the past.
It's very interesting that with React and these SPAs, like we have a button and that button fires an on click where we need to run some business logic. Like having that button just send an HTTP request to a controller that runs that business logic is just confusing. There's a lot there. And so we'll say it's so much easier when you just write an on click function in a React component and hand it to a button that runs.
Right.
That's just so much easier than just running some remote Rails controller action that does the business logic.
Right.
But we're finding with data, maybe it's not good to have data live for a long time on the client.
Right.
Maybe it's just good to have. So we're teasing apart the SPA. We're finding things are really good in the SPA and things that are not so great.
Exactly. And that was back to Chris's point about GraphQL being this necessary translation layer that has it does have business logic in it, in a sense. Actually, I mean, it definitely does.
Yeah. I mean,
but it's an abstraction layer over the database. So it's just I was almost going to get into this, but I ended up changing my data modeling. But originally, I was going to add this computed field on my weekly goals, which was the total count for the week. And apparently, it's pretty easy to do. In Postgres, you can have these derived fields or whatever on your tables. And then Hasura lets you run that and then expose it over GraphQL. They call it tracking. So you can add this, what was it called? A view. I think it's called a view. A view might be a table.
Yeah, I think a view is a table, and I think they have functions you can run on fields, but then they can also have like functions you can run on columns. I think they also have like transforms you can run on columns, which I think are the computed fields.
Okay, got you. But they let you do that. And that's definitely like business logic. And again, like I ended up not needing it because the built-in Hasura like aggregates worked for my use case. But the fact that I was considering it was just telling, just again, how easy it felt to work with GraphQL for the rest of the app that I had done so far. I was like, no, I actually would love it if this was in the API. You're thinking about like other clients now because you're building this thing and it's just like consuming this data source, which is so good at just serving you up this data. And you're like, yeah, if I ever had other clients, or just thinking about wanting more of the logic to be in the back end there. Because it's going to let me move faster on the front end. If I can just change a field, or if I need this thing again, it's like when we first used Gatsby and like there was those super helpful things. It's like, wait, I'm querying the table of contents from the GraphQL content mesh or whatever. Actually, it's pretty nice because now I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. You know what I mean? So it feels very different than like when we used to write Rails controllers and we would put like convenience things that were for the UI in the payload, which always felt so bad to us. Felt like really bad because you're tying this controller method, which is supposed to be a generic controller method, to a particular screen in the UI. And maybe it's just because of the fact that there's one endpoint for a post resource.
No.
And if you're going to get it, and now it has a comments count, or it has a user, top commenting user avatar JPEG or, URL, that's like, no, don't put that in there because now someone else is going to need to get the post and they're going to get this stuff that's just for your screen. We're making a generalized API here that serves the needs of many clients. Well, guess what? If you have a query language, it doesn't matter. Like, it actually is nice that you have more conveniences in there, because if you don't need them, you don't request them.
Yeah, I don't think you should feel bad about
but I did, Ryan.
business logic if it's like it's business logic that the front end is deciding what to run because the front end writes a query.
Yeah, that's the big deal, because from my perspective, the code is still in the React app.
Yeah.
That's the big part of it.
So to me, it doesn't matter where the business logic runs. It's the one that
it's maintained and lives.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I'm not crazy, right? When in the past we've been on consulting projects where we told the back end team to make things more generic so that the front end has more flexibility when it comes to building their pages.
I know but the reason for that is because the front end developer requests, I need this data.
Yeah.
And the back end developer goes off and writes 100 lines of code to get them that data, and then
things change.
The slightest business requirement throws all that out of sync. But if the front end developer is the one that's writing the query, they can tweak it.
And if the back end API is flexible enough to give them that power so that they can query what they need, then it's a lot more justifiable to add more and more things to the back end server.
And I don't think this is like, oh, you can only do this with GraphQL. The tooling and the ecosystem is what just
drives
makes this such a joy to do with GraphQL.
Yeah. It happened to us when we first started using JSON API resources. The first time we were able to build a page without changing the backend.
Yeah.
It happened.
Yep.
Because you could traverse the graph. And this is basically like that on like Nitros. You know what I mean? Because it's like you have aggregates, you have like...
Yeah, it's giving you computation that you get to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's computation you write on the front end and run on the back end.
Yep.
That's
great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's really awesome.
It really is awesome. It really is. Will it stay fast when my app grows? Who knows?
I know I always say this, and I've fallen into the trap of saying this, and then it never happens. But I do like this architecture that you're describing, because if we ever need to have an offline capable app or whatever, we haven't boxed ourselves out from that. So it's like we can progressively get to, the entire database living on your iPhone.
Absolutely. Dude,
But we've made this argument before, and it's like, but you never actually do that.
Right. That's good to have the argument in your back pocket, even though we know in reality you're never going to get there. Dude, the first app that I made like when I was getting into React last year, like my recipes app, I basically made this hook that was like use recipes and use recipe. And it was basically using GraphQL under the hood, but it was returning that normalized map so that I could just call use recipe 1.
Yep.
And if it was in the cache, it would return it. It would make unnecessary requests, which I was worried about for some reason. If I mutated it, everyone who was using that would get the update and all that kind of thing. So you can do that for sure. And if that was needed so for you to track changes to a document while you were offline, okay, let's tackle that when we get there, big guy.
Unnecessary requests are definitely something you should be concerned about, not because you're hammering your server. It's because you could load a page, send an unnecessary request, and the page could just change when it comes back. So I think that's fine.
That's different, though.
I think it's fine to worry about, like, I know it's different, but I think it's fine to be concerned about, like, controlling when requests go out, when data changes.
I don't know, man. See, you haven't come over all the way on this side of the line. You need some more of the Kool-Aid, man. We're all getting on a boat and going to the pyramids over here, and we're gonna leave you behind because I just like click on my DevTools now and I flip back to my page and there was like 7 requests. I don't know what was going on with them. They were like different use SWR queries that were refreshing. I don't know what's going on with them. I think this paradigm shines most. This is kind of what I'm talking about when you embrace this idea that you just have these queries that are like disconnected in a sense. They're like disconnected.
Yeah,
and your job is to make sure
they're disconnected is the same as a server rendered app's HTTP requests are disconnected.
What do you mean by that?
You can just send off, you can load those pages and they get you back all the data you need.
Yeah, but that's like a one-shot render. It's kind of different because like you're not going to have parts of the page that are like different.
Don't think of it as render. Think of it as like I send an HTTP request, I get back some data. That data is like HTML.
Yeah.
But that's the data I need for this page.
So wait, maybe we're talking past each other. What did you mean when you were saying like it's good to worry about your request or like when things change? I think the thing about worrying about things changing, I think it's better to be like, this part of my app is okay if things re-render because most of it is going to stay the same. For example, my homepage now shows me my entries and my friends' entries. And so there's like 20 models on the page or 20 objects or whatever. And then maybe every day, 1 or 2 of them change. So those totals will change like that. So it's okay if they're stale because when they come back, it'll just go from 1 to 2 and that's fine. Now, if you're in a situation where you have 1 blog post in the cache and you run to the index page and you show that 1 and then the other 100 come in, it's going to be bad that you show the stale data.
Yes, yeah.
So in that case, you want to do it differently.
That is the case that I'm talking about.
Yeah. So in that case, to me, the way I'm thinking about this right now, this is still kind of like thought forming in my head about how to think about this stuff. But like, I think different parts of your app can tolerate different degrees of staleness. And basically the way I'm building apps right now is like, how far can I push most of my pages tolerating a degree of staleness? Because if I can massively simplify my data fetching and mutation code in my app. So
yeah, you're starting with
because you're offloading it to this paradigm that's like the stale log.
You're starting with the
thing.
default that's everything can tolerate staleness,
yeah.
And then I can sprinkle in what to do
for a critical interaction, like the one that we want to work on tomorrow, which is like push to do it. And so I'm not going to, that's going to be a thing where I guess that's a mutation, so that's a little bit different. But no, I'll do it. Oh, no. It's because, it is going to change. Because right now, the index page, that is its own query, and the detail page for the goal where you create or delete entries are on 2 different pages, but I want to show it on the home page. So when you long press, I want to create an entry, and I also want to move the bar up. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. So I think, anyways, point being, not to get in the weeds, there's interactions where you do want to be optimistic in the UI, right? Mm-hmm. Or you want to make sure you're not showing stale data. And I think there's going to be good patterns for dealing with that kind of stuff, given an app that's built with this architecture. But I think for most apps, again, you're just better off if you can. I found it to be so much easier so far to be thinking like this Which is basically how a lot of the, Ember Data had the background reload thing, which was a similar idea. But because it was kind of like there was one choke point at the route for all your data, you didn't really get the flexibility of this. So in a React app, you have like all these different components, which maybe make their own queries. But if they're all using this like stale while revalidate pattern or something like it under the hood, then it can be fine. So that's all I was trying to say about not worrying about the queries.
Yeah, it's interesting. I look at this.
Just to finish the thought, with the recipes thing, it was like, I have a query for all recipes and I'm getting all fields. And now I'm going to a page with one recipe that has all fields. And I know the only way to get here is from the index page. And I know by the time I go there, I'm going to have it in my cache. So why can't I just go there and not make an extra request? That's kind of how I thought about it. But guess what? You decide to track that recipe with a URL. So you can start there. And now you have these different code paths. And now you want to get a recipe's ingredients on the detail page that you don't have. So now you have a notion of whether the recipe is actually in the store or not. So I've been down that road, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. If it's coming from a place of worrying about extra requests or whatever, it's like, yeah, that is a trade-off, but the code is going to cost way more, the complexity of the code. And if you can just write the query you need for the home page, write the query you need for the detail page and not worry about let the tooling re-request things as it needs to, then it's fine.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I mean, I think there's trade-offs there, right? I think there's trade-offs. I think for you to say to start in a position where every page requests its own data is the simplest thing to get me adding features. Like, I can't argue against that. Yeah. I think that's like a good thing.
Yeah.
I do think there's times where like you want to click on a recipe or something and you just want to immediately transition.
Yeah.
And so like there's straight.
You should be able to do that.
Yeah, you can. It's just like, what side is better to start from a default?
Yeah.
Where like
that's my argument.
The identity map would say like, you should just immediately render. You have the recipe, you've loaded the recipe on the index page, you click it. We don't need to wait for anything. We have all the data we need to render.
The problem is that's never true, because that hand waves away so much of the complexity, whether it's fully loaded, whether relationship, and whether that means it's loaded. So that's why I agree with you, but I think that I've never seen it in practice work out that way.
Yeah, it's too. I mean, that's totally fair. It's too hand wavy. It's way too hand wavy.
Right.
It basically says that we can just duplicate the database. Yep. Duplicating the database on the phone is easy, which
it's not.
It's not.
Yeah.
And for some apps it is, but
and the downsides of having disconnected queries that are like these dumb denormalized data structures that are snapshots of your data in time is actually not as bad as I used to think, because they can be refreshed, and because they can be cached, and because, all the reasons that we were talking about. It actually makes it very easy. It's almost like a server rendered.
The refreshing is, I think it's
okay. You could make it so that you never render from cache. So that's all you would have to do, and then you just hit the back button, and then again, you could see a loading spinner, so you never see stale data. Or after you create your new entry, you could update the cache for that query.
Call mutate.
Exactly. And optimistic UI it, but you'd have to do that manually. Apollo Cache has APIs for you to do that. But even still, all that being said, what I'm saying is it's like not worth it in most cases. And if you click around a lot of websites, well, now, just more websites doing this kind of thing. Twitter does this kind of thing. I mean, lots of apps do this kind of thing now. Even Apple apps do this. If I make a change to a note on my computer and I open my app to the note, it just shows it to me, and then the new lines of text just kind of fade in and it moves it. It's fine. It works, and it always feels fast. And that's what I noticed about like this app too. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I don't want to. I think the two different devices is hard mode to talk about this. I think it's more like, just going to a very simple example, every page makes its own data request. That's great, because you always know you have the data when you enter a page. there definitely are
But
situations.
it's related to the state of being stale too.
There are situations where you get into where you go to mutate data on a page,
And it's confusing that it hasn't been
and
reflected
now
elsewhere
you,
in the app.
or just elsewhere on that page. Like eventually your pages introduce enough complexity where you have to like start calling mutate, and then like there's something inside me that says like, okay, we're being imperative here, right? We're describing how things change. There is somewhere there is.
Have
a
you hit that in your React apps yet?
No, well, I'm using stuff that automatically updates, and I'm fine with the tolerance. So I never have to call mutate.
Okay. How does that work? Because Urkel?
Yeah, Urkel just knows. Stuff? Yeah, Urkel just knows.
It invalidates any query that has resource of entry 1, 2, 3.
I don't know if I have anything where that's even. I think I'm mutating the data where I can do it in a way that's like optimistic mutation, where I don't think I'm ever changing something in a form and then something in the header should change. So I don't think I have to worry about that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that though, like, it's imperative, but it's perfectly valid to say that like it's imperative, but it is so much easier.
Yeah.
Than having to normalize data on the front end.
Yeah. But you're just saying don't say that there's no downsides or that it's.
Yeah, I think there's like...
You're not running this risk of like, inconsistent data in the UI if it gets complex. I mean, that's really the interesting point is like get to a point where it's so complex that, Dude,
it's so interesting because in like React, if we had to call like component.rerender in React, there was just like, here's this like thing and you just call it component.rerender.
Yeah.
You like set state +1. Like if I showed you that code, we would say like this is
never do that.
This is bad.
You can't do that.
You're
missing the point.
Yeah. Or React itself is just
bad.
It's broken.
Yeah.
And I think it works nicely in React because the system knows everything. But with your data,
you're basically doing exactly that.
With these queries that are like requesting aggregates and so on, we're doing that. But there's a good reason for it. We can't download our whole database. I mean, I worked on an app last year that had millions of records. And I had to run aggregates on them. Yeah. And I had to get that from the server. I couldn't download all those records on the client. And when I tried to download all the records on the client, I was doing weird stuff. Like I was using request animation frame to like batch insert into the store
because the rendering was
because it would block the main thread. So you can make all the arguments you want about declarativeness and deriving data, but when I'm writing request animation frame to load data, I don't care about what you say. So yeah, I think this is interesting.
Dude, what you just said was super interesting about the fact that was like such a good gotcha where like calling create entry, insert entry 1 and then mutate the query is the same as calling set state +1 component.rerender. I mean, that's going to make me think. That was good.
But it's okay because we can't right now we can't come up with a world where you have the whole database on your phone. And in like maybe for a small app you can.
Matters though. I mean, it's more about the APIs and the paradigm,
Dude,
the re-rendering thing, it has to be fast enough to do it, but
the way you get the whole database on your phone is by giving your phone access to a query language.
Yeah. Where it effectively is. Yeah.
Who cares if the query is going over the network or it's going to something on the phone? Like your app doesn't care. The fact that it uses a network is just an implementation detail. So like your app actually thinks it has access to all the data.
Yep.
Because it
has a query language.
Because it has a query language.
Yeah.
So it's I think that's the trick here. Like I think that's why this feels okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to think more about the declarative imperative stuff because it's interesting.
There's like
also like
there's like three things of the declarative imperative. There's like one is calling like mutate or calling
small
a
brain,
function.
Big brain.
Yeah. Calling like mutate or calling like a function called refresh would be like very imperative. Then small brain. Then you have like stale well revalidate.
Mm-hmm.
So
it has some knowledge of whether the query is being used and
And then you just have a full, like,
unique resources.
There's something where it's like you have a database, and the way that database...
You bush cache. It's like you have cache keys, like that, surrogate keys. I mean, basically.
There's something that's like unrelated to rendering.
I'm sorry, everyone. This freaking mic is just pissing me off right now. I got to get rid of this stand.
There's like the final end of the spectrum, which is like you have a database, and that database is just constantly updating and changing.
Yeah.
With no reflection on rendering.
Yeah, you're like bound to the
like
query.
You could imagine.
You're like bound to queries, and then they just give you the latest data.
Yeah, and that.
Do you remember this?
Yeah, exactly.
Remember this like conversation we had with Luke Melia like 6 years ago, and he was like, "I just always want." We were talking about, it wasn't 6 years, maybe it was. Jeez, we were talking about like, oh, there should be like stale : 5, like you have to choose the seconds. He was like, every time I've ever done something with caching where I have to choose the seconds, it's always wrong. He's like, I just want the latest data. Just give me the latest data. It's kind of like what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, you know? I remember when he said that. I was like, yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Sold.
We didn't. Yeah, we almost shipped that API in that library, right? In Ember Data Storefront.
Yeah, because
it was like we never shipped it.
You can totally say like, oh, I can tolerate 10 minutes of staleness with this data, but
you'd prefer to just know when the things change.
Yeah. It's not only that, it's usually when, I think his point was whenever he writes 5 minutes, it's always just like, he doesn't actually want 5 minutes. It's just like
the product person wants more. The ops people want less or whatever.
Yeah. It's always just like 5 minutes, and then you hit some point where it's like, shit, I don't want to wait 4 more minutes for this like thing that happened a minute ago to show up on my app.
Right. Someone in that front office is like, why isn't the new article on the homepage or the video up or whatever? It also came up when we were making embermap.com fast bootable because of the cache situation there. And at the end of the day, the best thing was just that the back end told the front end when a model changed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I really like the idea of exploring this conversation and exploring query languages.
Yeah, I do too. It's pretty interesting how dramatic of it. I felt like it was very easy for me to write off GraphQL for a long time because it felt like that's not the layer I care about. It's implementation detail. Whereas now it feels like it's a bigger part of my concern as an app developer. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like
I still think
it's
think
not
GraphQL
implementation detail.
I do.
It's literally changing what code I write in my React component.
But it doesn't. To me, if there was like you could write SQL in your React component.
Yeah, that would change it too. And that wouldn't be an implementation detail.
No,
that would be a new way that you get
architecturally,
data.
It's still the same to me.
No, it's not.
And again, I'm not. Again, I think GraphQL is awesome. I'm not trying to say you shouldn't be for GraphQL, but it's the idea here.
I'll tell you that they're paying me.
How much?
No, I'm just saying it is. It's what I'm saying is I didn't give it enough of a. Yeah, it's a bigger piece. It is part of the stack. It's part of. If you have GraphQL, you do have a query language, which means you can do things differently than if you didn't.
But I could give you a GraphQL API that's just brutal.
Okay, you know what I mean. A good, well implemented, flexible.
Yeah. I guess that's why I think that it's I think it's a query language. I think if you could write SQL in your React component, I think you'd be fine with
that. Sure. You would do things that would be easier to do in SQL than they would in JavaScript, let's say.
Yeah, aggregates.
Yeah, nesting. Yeah, transforming.
Yeah. I mean, you'd still have to open up the docs for inner join. But
yeah, exactly. No, that's the point, right? Is just that it's not irrelevant to how you structure your app. It's not.
I think
it's literally easier.
We're playing on easy mode by using Hasura.
Yeah.
And I think that the GraphQL is great because of all the tooling and libraries. But I don't see that as a thing that is fundamentally because of GraphQL. I think that the reason that stuff exists was because GraphQL nailed it. I don't want to dismiss any of that.
The architect, the design decisions behind GraphQL.
Yeah, I think that like architecturally this could exist with other things.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
Sure, and I think that's because of GraphQL.
nail the design.
Just errors in GraphQL
Yeah.
is enough to make to
and typing.
Yes, so many good things that they nailed.
Yeah.
For me though, it's not why I would dismiss GraphQL. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't say that, like, the reasons I would dismiss GraphQL are, I mean, what are they? They would be that, like, you still have to write a lot of backend code. It's still too easy to just arbitrarily write mutations, where, like, the rest stuff is really good. You have certain amount of
constrained small public interface, basically.
Certain amount of operations that you run.
You can't create a user without creating a whatever.
Right. Where with, GraphQL, so you can write that publish post mutation.
Yeah.
So I like that thinking. Yeah. I don't know, I kind of went like...
I understand what you're saying, though, but I don't know if I'm convinced. I think that it has a bigger effect than I originally thought on how you think about,
That's interesting. Okay, so that's interesting. I think that GraphQL created the ecosystem for things like Hasura to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reason that I'm enjoying these apps so much is because of Hasura and not because of GraphQL. Now I realize that Hasura can't exist.
Yeah.
But like the GraphQL thing would be amazing for the Hasura developers, not so much amazing for me. Yeah, when I write GraphQL, I just think of it as like, I never think like, oh man, what if I couldn't write GraphQL here, I'd be screwed. I never have that thought. The GraphQL is like an implementation detail of what I'm trying to get, what I'm trying to do.
No, but it changes things.
It changes things for people that are writing Hasura, but it doesn't change things for me.
No.
If you took away GraphQL and replaced it with something else.
A query builder from AWS or something?
I'm sorry. I just imagined a query builder from AWS and I just started crying inside.
A query builder from Taylor Otwell.
Yeah. Or just SQL. I mean, SQL is not as nice as the nice aggregate functions that Hasura gives you.
But even if you had active record on the client, which is an amazing piece of engineering, let's say you had active record.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. It's like the same. Yeah. And,
GraphQL is better.
Why? They're both
because active record.
You're both.
Yeah, they are query builders, but the way you query and get data in GraphQL is literally designed for the kind of UIs that we build every day. So it's active record could give you a hydrated graph of data, but then you'd have to transform it more. And so you'd be writing more logic, which has never been the worst part about that.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, you're fine with it too. Guess what? I'm going to blow you out of the water, dude. I'm going to run laps around you because I don't have to write that code anymore. You just click some buttons in a graphical and you have all the data you need. It's what I'm saying is that it has removed a chunk of the work that used to be part of it. It literally is not even there anymore.
I guess I don't like, I'm not, yeah, they're like the same. They're the same category.
It's an order of magnitude difference for me because,
but it doesn't change anything.
And it does change things because you want more stuff in there. You actually want more things in there because it makes you're basically writing less code. You're writing less code, right? If I could have like some easy computed fields on a table or something, basically all the stuff that is included in Hasura that is done for me and that I don't manage or maintain at all. I'm including that.
That is Hasura. Like that is like
okay.
I look at it,
but it's also
I look at Hasura and Firebase and Amplify.
No, but Firebase is different because in my Firebase app, like in my work journal, dude, we should open my computer right now. We'll look at it after we shut this off. My work journal app, I am querying my work journal entries the way Firebase told me to.
I should not have brought up Firebase because everyone that uses Firebase
complains about that data.
It just has a million complaints about it.
Yeah, exactly. But that is the point. I mean, the point is that like, yeah, whatever. We're not talking about theoretical technologies. We're talking about the fact that GraphQL was designed to power like UIs, and it does. Dude, with my Firebase app, they gave me a way to query data. It was super easy, and it was real time, so it was even better than what I have right now with Hasura. And yet, all I wanted to do was get out of Firebase as soon as possible. So I queried the flat list entries, and now I'm just working with JavaScript, and hallelujah, I'm out of there.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing maps and reduces and transforms. Whereas here, it's like, oh, I have a form right here, and I need to do a drop down of categories with their labels, and I want to show you which. I'm just going to query what I need in graphical and just put it in a query and just render it. And that's like different than how I've thought about it before. It's just different. Oh, I want to add a bar right below your current 5 goals for this week that has all of your last week's goals. Let me just click around Hasura. Oh, last week aggregate entries.
I'm not.
It's different.
But I'm not.
It's not. It's
I'm not
categorically
saying,
different. It's different. It's like now I would be much more likely to add logic to my back end, even if it was custom. If I wanted something like, this is what I'm going to add next, which is like, for my friend, like how many entries do we have across a whole week up there? So like, I would love to just be able to get that off of the user object. I'll see if I can get it as a nested query easily, but like, it would be pretty awesome if I could just say, I don't know, like, that'd be kind of crazy, but this is taking it to the extreme, like last week's total, right? Last week's total, last week's goal. It's almost like I want a way to... That's a silly example since that's easy to get with the out-of-the-box things, but that's the kind of thing that, again, you would... For me, I can see it much more likely to add it onto this entity in my backend on GraphQL, so it's easy to query, because now... If I need it in one place, guess what? I'm probably going to need it somewhere else. I have it. It's really easy. It saves me from writing any code in the front end at all. So whereas that's not the kind of thing I would think about doing ever in a Rails backend that I was writing. Adding computed derived data just for the sake of it, unless I had to for performance reasons. But that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about like the easiest way to get data, you know?
Yeah. Again, I think that if we took GraphQL...
I'll show you my Firebase app.
I think we are very, very lucky that we are using GraphQL through Hasura. That's all. I
guess we could be arguing semantics about whether GraphQL deserves the praise here. I think it does, because...
It absolutely does, because GraphQL, you don't have Hasura without GraphQL. I'm just saying, for our point of view, I think we can say that like, GraphQL is great because of all the tooling, but I don't think GraphQL actually improves the fact that it's GraphQL actually improves my day-to-day of development. For me, it's going to Hasura, click a few things, use the things that Amplify generates for me. Those all come from GraphQL, and those all use GraphQL, but I'm not writing resolvers.
All right, this vote is too close to call today. I think we're going to have to agree to disagree for now, but maybe next week we'll be able to pick it up after we simmer on this a little bit. See which ways the votes are cast and who wins this debate right here.
I feel like I'm starting from a very unfair position because everyone loves GraphQL. So if you just say... Hey,
you're the grumpy old guy with like
that's what people think. They just immediately.
And goodbye, everybody. No, just kidding.
That's immediately We're like, no, you said something bad about Graph?
Yeah. You're trying to make it clear that you're not saying. You're making a more nuanced point. Yeah.
It's like I don't freaking care about the battery and the technology in a battery. But I love the fact that I can open my laptop from anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with you.
I
think the analogy is breaking down. I'm going to have to think about it, though. And we're at about an hour, and I know you have to run soon. So I actually think it might be fun to talk about this next week after we have another week of experience, since I'm hacking on this thing. So that was really interesting, though. It's given me a lot of thought to think about. Yeah. If anyone has any thoughts, let us know. If not, we'll be here next week.
GraphQL good. rest bad. No,
Sounds
I'm in that.
good
I'm in
idea,
that camp.
bad
I'm
idea.
in that camp.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for joining us. Again, if you're new, welcome aboard. And if you like the show, give us a review. Let us know what you think. And we will see y'all next week. Bye.